Welcome back. Government needs to start at the very beginning if it's serious about eradicating inequality. For many children, that inequality starts the moment they are conceived. Amandla.mobi junior campaigner Dineo Rabaholo says government should in fact consider extending support grants to pregnant women. In a recent opinion piece published in the City Press just on Sunday, this, she said, was the best way to protect the future of children who are already born into disadvantaged circumstances. To unpack this further, we're joined by Dineo Rabaholo herself. Dineo, a very good evening to you. Thank you for being on Nightline. So, what have you done is the first question I want to ask you, having looked at just the mixed reaction to this proposal. Why do we need a grant for pregnant women in South Africa, poor pregnant women?
You know, we don't speak about the fact that South Africa has a malnutrition problem. Stats show that 1 in 4 children are born stunted. Now, a stunted child means that the child either did not receive the right nutrition or enough of the right food, you know. It's a huge problem if you consider that 28% of our population is children under 15. And if they're born stunted, that means their ability to learn, their ability to grow optimally, and be functional going on is compromised. So that has an effect on the future.
But the obvious question that your piece has raised since publication has been about funds, financing.
Yes.
We know South Africa is a country of many competing and very pressing interests. So many billions of rand are already poured into social welfare. We also need these huge sums for healthcare. We need money for education. An additional layer of grant funding, that's more billions going out of the public purse. How should we structure that? Yeah.
So I'll answer that without making, I don't want to give Treasury or to do their job. But I'll answer that this way, right? It's already going to impact the economy because we literally are saying there's going to be a huge population in the future that is not going to be developed optimally, meaning there's going to be health implications, meaning the education is also going to need added support. So that's already going to be a problem. But the sun is coming up. So I'll put this challenge to the budget speech is coming up and the sun. So I'll put this challenge to the budget, to Date Tito Mboweni and say, well, there's a report that's out that says about 7 billion of our monies are leaving, like multinationals do not account for their corporate income tax to the amount of 7 billion rands. That's a lot of money, right? So,
do you think there's a will, though, to move in that direction?
Yeah. Like, if we speak a lot about corruption, we speak a lot, but we center it on politicians. Let's target corporate multinationals and bring back that money so that we can accommodate all these social ills that people do not cause. Poverty is man-made. It's a systematic issue, and systems need to deal with it.
I'll go back to the grant specifics in a moment, but I want us to talk about South Africa and our understanding of poverty, because often the assumption is that by giving a poor elderly woman the 1,000 rand plus every month, she should be fine, right? You've got the young woman who's got a kid, she's raising a kid, she's a single mother in the township, unemployed. She's getting just under 1,000 last time I checked. And there are all sorts of ideas, misconceptions, but some of it true, about where this money goes. Do you think we spend enough time in this country trying to understand poverty beyond just the payouts monthly?
No. I think this country has a serious problem of disliking the poor. I call all of those issues privileged blind spots, because the more we grow up the economic ladder, we start thinking the poor are the problem and not look at how did the poor get where they are. Did they cause the issues that landed them there? So we don't do enough. In fact, we blame them for their conditions instead of looking at ways to empower them so that they can rise up from their economic situations as well.
Speak to me then about the idea that grant beneficiaries, a lot of them or some of them, do not use the money for its intended purpose. So why do we need to create another category of money that's being given to people where you're not guaranteed that, as you say, it'll go to issues of prenatal care and nutrition?
Studies have, VETS has done studies, the medical journal actually has studies, both local and international, that disprove that myth, that people use grants for ulterior motives. Actually, grants get used by women to improve the lives of their children. Children are being educated from grants. Households are being fed from grants. So there's studies, but there's also lived experience that disprove that notion. So blind spots make us want to undermine the poor and the choices that they make, but lived experiences and studies have shown that actually grants are used very beneficially, that households, that children are actually being reared and having productive futures because of what their mothers and their parents do with those grants that they get. Also, grants are not a favor that the government does for people. In an unequal society, a grant is an empowerment tool to help the poor. So maybe that the mind shift also needs to change, of thinking that grants are a favor.
Let me come in there and ask you then, I mean, looking at the grants that are already being paid out by the government, have they done what you're saying? Have they indeed empowered people? Because for years we've been dancing around the same issue around whether they're a hand up or a hand out.
Yeah, they have. I mean, I can talk personal stories, but research also shows that children, transport monies, food, and things like that. So grants are helping more than actually being used for those bad things. So they have helped. I'm sure you and I can even tell of personal stories where mothers, single mothers especially, or teenage mothers, are dependent on grants to give their children a better future.
Long-term sustainability, and I know this is an interest of yours, an area of interest for you at least, long-term sustainable ideas to get South Africa's largely poor population out of their dire circumstances. What should the plan be tackling? I mean, yes, you've got the layer of grants, but the reality is we need a bigger, more detailed plan that will eventually, hopefully, lead us to an area where people do not need grants.
Absolutely. Tackle inequality, tackle the unemployment problem. So if people are not unemployed, if people are unemployed, then that's what leads us to these issues as well. But also, going back to the issue of nutrition, if children are already born going to be unemployable, that's a huge problem, right? So you have to tackle not just unemployment, but tackle issues that make people unemployable. So all of those issues need to come and be tackled with. So our government needs to get serious with interventions that deal with social ills like that, that tackle unemployment in a way that is meaningful, not just words, not just, but actual interventions that get to the heart of inequality and its effects.
Dineo Rabaholo, I look forward to more of your writing. I'm sure this conversation will stir a lot of thoughts and emotion. Thank you so much for being on Nightline tonight.
Thank you for having me.